We're also seeing real frustration with PJM, with all the interconnection queues and the grid managers. At the auctions, the rates are just going up and up, and there's an effort, a lot of governors, and this is bipartisan. We've seen the governor of Virginia, the governor of Pennsylvania in particular, really making a point to try to keep these things in line so that their residents are not dealing with astronomical increases in their utility bills. So there are states that are taking novel approaches. There's policy that they can pass. There's pressure they can put using the bully pulpit as governor. And there's a number of other states taking smart action, but it's all just trying to make up for obviously what's not happening and actually moving in the wrong direction in Washington.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Renewable Rides, the show where we explore how the energy transition is reshaping the way we live, build, and do business. Today we're joined by Chris Moyer, founder and president of Eco Communications Advisors, a Washington, D.C.-based firm focused on climate, clean energy, and sustainability policy. Chris has spent nearly 2 decades advising U.S. senators, presidential campaigns, and clean energy leaders on how to shape and communicate effective strategies for the energy transition. He worked with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid on major renewable energy programs and has since helped guide the rollout of landmark efforts like the Inflation Reduction Act. In this episode, we'll explore how policy, regulation, and storytelling combine to accelerate or slow the energy transition. What headwinds and opportunities lie ahead for business, and how can leaders frame energy investments as a competitive advantage? Chris, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you.
It's great to be here with you guys. Thank you for having me.
We always like to start with what are you passionate about? So it is.
Well, I have a newborn at home, and so I'm adjusting to life as a first-time dad, and it's time-consuming, but in the most wonderful way. And so that is really my biggest passion right now. And he's just growing and just smiling more, and it's just a wonder to see all the changes over time.
Nice. Is he being kind? Are you getting sleep?
Sleep deprivation is a real thing, but it is it's worth it. And he's a great baby.
That's awesome. How old is he now?
He's about 3 months old.
Nice. How did you get into this industry? You're on the policy communications side of things. Where did you grow up? What did you do? How did you get excited and interested in policy and comms?
Yeah, so this all really starts on the Las Vegas Strip, which is probably not what you expected me to say. But I grew up in New Hampshire, and I had never been to Nevada, Las Vegas. And after I graduated from college, I came down to DC, was looking for a job on Capitol Hill. I was really interested in working on Capitol Hill. And I was reaching out to a bunch of people, sending cold emails, my resume, and hoping to hear back from some of them. I heard back from maybe 3, and one of them happened to be the communications director for the Senate Majority Leader at the time, who was Harry Reid. And Harry Reid was the senator from Nevada. And they said, resume sounds great. You seem like you could be a good fit. The only catch is you have to move to Las Vegas. And I was sitting at my aunt and uncle's house. I didn't have a place to live yet, and obviously no job. And there was about 3 feet of snow on the ground in February, and 75 degrees in Las Vegas when I looked it up online. It sounded pretty good. I didn't know about the 120 come summer, but I did about 10 days after that. I flew to Las Vegas, and I was driving my rental car down the Las Vegas Strip, taking in all the neon lights. And I was like, what in the world am I getting myself into? And I stayed at the MGM Grand for about 10 days while I looked for a permanent place to live. And within 2 days, I was standing next to President Obama at an event, and it was such a whirlwind. And that was shortly after major legislation was passed to really promote clean energy in Congress. And we were doing visits to solar arrays all around the Las Vegas Valley. We were going to geothermal facilities. We were doing, everything. And that was the beginning really of my education on clean energy and the energy transition. And throughout my career, going back, that was about 15 years ago, it's always been part of what I've done. And within the last several years, it's everything that I do. It's the only thing that we focus on. And so we have a small strategic communications firm here in Washington, D.C. that only does climate, clean energy, and working with companies and policy advocacy organizations. And it all started with that, unexpected move west to Las Vegas as a 22-year-old.
That's a great story. Solid hook there on starting on the Las Vegas Strip. I like that. Was not anticipating that. Well, so tell us more. So you mentioned working with business and sustainability leaders, and I think most often they're kind of technical in their craft, whether it be facilities or operations or real estate or sustainability in general. And policy is something that impacts their lives, but they might not view how much they can impact policy. And so where do you sit, and kind of how do you see business leaders being able to impact change?
Well, I think every business leader in clean energy should be learning the lesson from this past year, especially with the passage of the big bill in July, because the industry was seemingly caught off guard. They were thinking that maybe the rollbacks that actually happened weren't going to happen because there seemed to be some bipartisan support for keeping the tax credits in place, for example. Some of the tax credits, of course, stayed in place, but obviously there's a deadline now for example, for next July to get, let's say, solar projects put forward. And you all have talked about those policies in detail in previous episodes in quite an effective way. But we really help these business leaders understand why policy matters to their business. They can't ignore it. And if you ignore it, the problem only gets worse because you're going to have to deal with policy eventually. And so we help with using communications. How does communications work? You think of lobbying. You think of going up to Capitol Hill and talking to a legislator or their staff. But communications, especially in this day and age, is really creating the environment that can put pressure on members of Congress to vote a certain way. And there's all sorts of strategies that we work on with our clients to do that so that we get the outcomes that they want, the businesses need, and so that they can continue to grow, create jobs, put more affordable energy on the grid, and really transition and benefit communities and states all across the country.
If you could summarize the policy landscape and the shift from, you obviously were involved in influencing the Inflation Reduction Act, and sort of globally, I think, really recognized as being the leading policy to drive innovation and have capital drive the market instead of maybe top-down policy driving the market necessarily. How would you say that shifted in the last year or so? What is the landscape looking like today, and what should people be most aware of, or what do you see as being the biggest misconception?
Yeah, certainly it's been a 180 from the Inflation Reduction Act. As I mentioned, a lot of those policies were rolled back. And the leadership that the United States, there had been bipartisan consensus around leadership for getting more energy onto the grid at a time when AI is driving data center growth across the country, and they're just sapping up energy. And it's really, could be putting the burden on regular households that are already seeing their energy prices going up. When it comes to global competition with other countries, China, India, all over the country, we're taking a step back from that. And certainly when it comes to reliability, there's arguments to be made on affordability, reliability, and global competition. Not to mention, if you want to really invigorate the manufacturing sector and jobs in the United States, this is a growing industry, and it doesn't have to be and shouldn't be partisan. And the good thing, I think, that despite the federal headwinds, and boy, they are strong, the private sector is still taking a longer view, and there's still investment being made, and there's still the facts on the ground that matter. Facts seem to matter less in Washington when it comes to these policy debates. But the fact is, if you can get something onto the grid faster and cheaper, that's going to win over longer and slower, and more expensive. So those realities don't change based on any administration.
Yeah. Do you find there's some positive outcomes as a result of the negative stance? We're in the commercial industrial sector. supporting behind the meter on-site energy systems. And I think our read on it is, the less support there is for utility scale renewables, it's going to drive the price up, it's going to drive down reliability. So it's going to drive more investment in clean on-site energy systems. Are you seeing that across the board where there's this kind of top level stance that appears negative but has these consequences that drive actually positive outcomes?
Yeah, it's an interesting point because there's actually some unintended consequences that we're starting to see. Because there is the shorter timeline for the tax credits for building new facilities and installations and all these projects of July of 2026, there's a rush now. And so there's going to be a big surge. It's kind of like we saw with the EV tax credit expiring at the end of September. There was a huge uptick in consumers purchasing electric cars, and leasing them as well. And we're kind of seeing that. But then what comes next is maybe a cliff. And so in the short term, there's some good outcomes. But there's going to be more unintended consequences that we can't really anticipate at this point. But we are starting to see how the market is reacting. It's been a few months now since the bill passed. And you combine that with the administrative actions of just more scrutiny, cancellations of permits that were already given out and well vetted. We're gonna see what happens. But I also think there's an opportunity to maybe strengthen the political muscles of the industry. If you have maybe fewer folks, because unfortunately some of these smaller developers might go out of business and already are starting to go out of business. You might see some consolidation. And so while that's not good for the jobs that are being lost, and no one wants to see any business go bankrupt, but if an unexpected consequence or outcome could be that there's more consolidation that can then make better, stronger decisions, have more unity to shape future policy, then that could be a positive outcome. But we're looking for silver linings at this point, for sure.
Yeah. I'm curious, you're in Washington. You spend a lot of time, I'd imagine, on the federal policy side of things. But have we seen with the 180, as you describe it earlier in the year, are you seeing the more state municipal policies starting to rise up again and support these clean energy initiatives?
Yeah, I think, well, just one consequence of the big bill passing is that we're actually seeing a speeding up of some permitting in some states, because a state like Colorado, for example, California as well, they understand that these projects can take a long time to get through the bureaucracy at the state level. And so Colorado, I was just speaking with the head of the energy office in Colorado, and he was talking about how they're prioritizing helping developers get everything in order so that they can meet the July 2026 deadline. I think that's smart. That's reacting in a positive way. We're also seeing states that are offering their own incentives for, again, electric vehicles that continue to maybe help drive that market. But other states are facing. They have to deal with the reality on the ground, right? There's energy demand. Demand for energy is growing for the first time in decades, and states have to try to do that. We're also seeing real frustration with PJM, with all the interconnection queues and the grid managers. At the auctions, the rates are just going up and up, and there's an effort, a lot of governors, and this is bipartisan. We've seen the governor of Virginia, the governor of Pennsylvania in particular, really making a point to try to keep these things in line so that their residents are not dealing with astronomical increases in their utility bills. So there are states that are taking novel approaches. There's policy that they can pass. There's pressure they can put using the bully pulpit as governor. And there's a number of other states taking smart action, but it's all just trying to make up for obviously what's not happening and actually moving in the wrong direction in Washington.
I think many business leaders don't think they can influence policy, and they don't really know how to do it. Based on your experience, what can they be doing? What can have sort of immediate impact in terms of their actions, and then strategically, as they then map it out, how extensive can their influence become?
I think it is a mistake to think that you can't influence policy. If you're a company based in, I'll stick with Nevada. If you're based in Nevada and you have employees and you're paying state, local, federal taxes in Nevada, there's an opportunity for you to go talk to the senators, the members of Congress that represent your state. And they will take a meeting. They will listen to you. They will listen to your employees who have stories to tell about how they have these good jobs that's really contributing to something that's a positive for the state and for society, and how that is really important for supporting their family. And so those are the things that someone who worked in Congress in the United States Senate, these voices from constituents matter. And it might seem like they don't. There's a lot of money in politics. There's a lot of a sense that, it really doesn't matter. But most of these Senate offices are tracking who's calling their office every day on the pro side of an issue, on the anti side, and they're tallied up. And the senators read these things. They actually see these things. And so you should certainly not think that there's no way to influence the outcomes. And we work with companies all the time and advocacy organizations that are pushing for better policy on the understanding the policy and the political pressure points, really, of individual members of Congress and senators, and what the best way is to kind of get to them and make your argument to them.
One of the things that I feel like we've been seeing of late, and I'm curious in the conversations you're having, and if this is true as well, which is the shift of these clean energy technologies, the renewables, being a sustainable conversation to one that's more of resilience and reliability and kind of energy sovereignty of reducing reliance elsewhere. Like, is that something that is working its way across Washington? And how has you mentioned the explosive growth in demand driven by electrification and data centers. How is that now becoming more of a security conversation than a sustainability conversation?
Yeah, so there's a lot of arguments that have resonance with small subsets and maybe some groups, but there's also arguments that have broad resonance. And when you talk about national security, when you talk about just energy security and reliability, and certainly when you talk about affordability is the name of the game right now when it comes to messaging around climate, period. You're not talking about existentialism. You're not talking about half-degree temperature increases, because that feels far off to the average voter. You're not going to win an election in some of these key states if you're talking about that instead of what actually matters on a day-to-day basis to people. And that's a shift, because there's been this climate movement that has achieved a lot, but it kind of fell flat. And there was more. You mentioned the IRA and the impact and what that meant globally, but politically that didn't do anything and that's why it was, it's been torn down quite a bit. So, and then when you think about the reason why energy security and national security matter, is you think about Russia and the war in Ukraine. A lot of European countries wanted to find alternatives to Russian gas, and so if you can have if you can be self-sufficient as a country, there's some projects happening that we've been involved with clients in Germany, for example, where they are building a geothermal plant that can provide energy and heat to the communities and to a large area in the country. And that means they're not reliant on a hostile actor like Russia. So there's really compelling arguments to make that don't have anything to do with climate existentialism.
Can you share any specific examples of companies that have got policy and communication right and realized downstream benefits of that, or people who have not done a good job and then suffered, or more broadly, like the industry, because it feels like, to your point, the renewable sector definitely got outmaneuvered by, say, the oil and gas sector in the US, but are there then specific examples within that?
Well, you mentioned oil and gas. I disagree with them on the substance, but politically, they know what they're doing, and they get their way. They're savvy. They have resources. They're also more consolidated. You don't hear about the oil and gas miners. You hear about the oil and gas majors. Yeah. It's a smaller group of folks with, again, a lot of money, and they have a ton of influence. And they've gotten, since January, they've pretty much gotten everything they've wanted. And I think I am imploring a lot of folks in clean energy company leadership to try to come up with a way to build that political power. We don't have to match oil and gas dollar for dollar. Probably that may not happen for a long, long time, but we don't need to in order to get meaningful progress. And I just don't think there's been that much attention paid to Washington in the way that is needed. So there's definitely, companies that are doing well. There's some associations that have been doing a good job, but it's a real challenge. Just there's so many different players in this industry that it's hard to get everyone aligned.
Yeah, you're dead on there. Well, so as we look ahead, if you're advising a C-level leader or just a leader within a large commercial or industrial firm, a retailer, a manufacturer that has a significant footprint across the U.S. and they're thinking about their energy transition roadmap. And when I say energy, I think oftentimes you think energy transition, you think sustainability, but really in this day and age, it's affordability, it's hedging against cost increases, it's reliability. But as they build their energy transition roadmap, what are some of the strategic questions you might ask them or bits of wisdom you would impart upon them?
One, I'm going to go to communications because that's what we do. And I always think communications should be a key part of your overall strategy. A colleague of mine has called it a peacetime strategy. If you don't think you need elected officials, that's the time to talk to them, really build those relationships, because then you don't want to be coming to them for the first time when you're really in need. And I think we see too many projects across the country that aren't deployed because they get voted down at a city council meeting or a county council because 3 people show up opposing using oil and gas talking points, and there's no one on the pro side. And so, there's some really great organizations, including one called Greenlight that is working to identify when these votes are happening on projects all across the country and get people to show up so that their elected officials feel confident that they have constituents supporting them. So in terms of strategy for a company, a lot of companies are doing this or thinking about it, which is great. But building up the support with grassroots level, local level, but you have to think both locally and federally too. You should know who all your elected officials are, and make sure that you're in touch with them and constantly communicating what you're doing and all the benefits you're providing, because they want to know about that. And when you have a good story to tell, you should tell it as often as you can.
Are there, going back to the example of someone that has 100, 500 properties or locations of their business around the country, so they're across a wide variety of jurisdictions, are there any tools that allow me to, as a business leader, kind of convey my position to all of the different senators or representatives, or is it just I'll pick up the phone and dial one at a time? Like, is there a way to kind of share my feelings across a wide swath of the politicians?
Well, certainly your employees can be your best advocates if everyone's aligned on, we're doing good work here and we really want to make sure we can continue and grow and have more impact, really. Then those are all effective advocates and spokespeople for who can communicate where they live. Because if you're a senator from Nevada, you don't really care that much about what a constituent in Wisconsin is saying. And so you can really set up a mechanism for employees to do outreach to different offices. I also think in this media environment that is so scattered, and it's not just like 3 TV channels, hasn't been for a long time, you got to be communicating and telling your message, just conveying your core message everywhere. So if you're a spokesperson, if you're a CEO of a company, you should be doing a lot of press and a lot of communication to tell your story. We help leaders, spokespeople with media training, for example, and that's something that I think a lot of people tend to be interested in, because it's like people fear public speaking, right? It's like they fear it more than death in some cases. There's some crazy poll about that. But, if we try to help them overcome that fear. And then once they do, it's a great tool to have, and it should be used often.
As you look out over the next few years, we're obviously seeing the macro trends playing out of energy low growth, capacity constrained grid. We're going to go midterms, elections. Any under the radar surprises you're expecting, or things that we should be thinking about and looking out for or positioning around?
I think there are a couple things I'd say here. One is, despite everything that's happened federally this year, there still could be opportunities to make progress, even though it doesn't seem like it. Some of the things that fly under the radar don't get all the attention because they're not wrapped up in a massive bill. There are things that can happen that can be positive for businesses, and that's one thing. And then certainly if there's a change in power in the next midterm elections, let's say the Democrats win the House and you still have maybe a Republican Senate and President Trump, there still could be opportunities to get some things done. So that's one thing. And another just thing I'm keeping a close eye on is, as more and more of these data centers get favorable treatment in certain jurisdictions, what's the backlash going to be from residents as their bills go up? And is there, this seems like there's maybe growing grassroots sentiment around that. And how, the energy they need is critical for these data centers. So their energy is intrinsically tied into the AI story. And I think there's probably general agreement that we'd rather have the US lead on AI than another country, and certainly a hostile country. But that's not going to happen if we can't get the energy to these data centers. And there has to be a thoughtful approach to that. You can't just say, I'm going to build all these data centers, and then they never build them, but rates go up for residents and small businesses as well. And so there's been a lot of chatter for the last year and a half around data centers. It's been a trend, but I think as that story evolves, there's going to be some really interesting nuances and fights, and it's not clear exactly how that's going to play out, but it has major implications certainly for energy.
Mm. It's a crazy topic, isn't it? Because I think just in the last week, there's been 3 of the majors pull back on planned data centers as a result of either actual or perceived public objection to it and making it harder than probably they want it to be. I think arguably they could become the biggest advocates for the industry, couldn't they? Because they're unfortunately going to be the scapegoats for much of what plays out, because people blame them for rates increases and tax rate increases and consuming our resources and all of these trends that are going to play out. Do you think they will be in a position to be the biggest advocates for doing this the right way? Or are they just so heads down trying to win the war on owning the market from a data center play?
Yeah, they could be. It's a little bit hard to say, but what I would warn is that there could be an effort to blame a lot of your listeners, renewable energy folks, on the raised higher prices, and even when it might be data centers that are contributing to that. And so, opponents of clean energy are going to really try to get that message out. They're already starting to do that. And there's a real risk that has business implications. And that's a real concern that I have.
Yeah. I think the key is to, when you dig into the rate cases, the primary driver is the cost to deliver the power. The transmission and distribution is what's driving a lot of the rate increases.
And actually gas price volatility.
Yeah, and gas price volatility. Well, so let's transition. This has been an excellent conversation. I think something that we know, policy impacts the industry, but I don't think many people understand how much they can impact policy. So very much appreciate all the work you're doing. I'd like to switch to the power surge round and ask the question that we ask all of our listeners. If you could be any one energy technology, what would it be and why, Chris?
Well, you said I have some latitude here to not answer it maybe literally. And so I'm going to take that latitude to hammer home a core message that I hope to get across. And this is what we advocate for in our media training. So I should live by that too. and that is I would be the entity that is building political power and using it. I think there's people, the members of Congress who vote against the interest of the industry should not be getting campaign checks from the industry. That feels like common sense to me, but I don't know that that's happening like that. There need to be consequences for voting against the industry. That's what matters in how elected officials listen. They don't, you could write a letter to them and that's nice, but they care about campaign cash and reelection. And if you're not shaping that outcome in any way, then they're not going to listen to you as much. Unfortunately, that's not how it should work, but that tends to be the way it does work in Washington. And so there needs to be an aggressive effort to talk about all the benefits of clean energy. I think about wind a lot and the offshore wind industry, which has been battered more than any other sector. And too often I see companies that are just not responding to the claims of windmills causing cancer or all the attacks. I won't repeat them. They don't merit repetition. But the opportunity is there to push back and just not let public sentiment go against you, because if you lose public sentiment, then you lose members of Congress who are voting and making these decisions. And so it's really detrimental to your business, and you can go out of business. We're seeing too many companies go out of business. And so I think there should be a more robust approach to selling the industry on a general basis and shaping public opinion, because that's how policy flows after that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's not really the best answer to your question, perhaps, but that's really what I hope to convey, is the importance of building that political muscle.
It's such a powerful tool in the toolbox, isn't it? I think one that many of us overlook. And so I really appreciate you bringing it up. For people who want to kind of either keep track of the policy landscape or learn about it, are there any resources that you'd recommend, either books, podcasts, newsletters that you kind of actively follow or enjoy?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a couple. One will be self-serving, so I'll say that second. But I think the Volts podcast does an excellent job having just really innovators in the space. Clean tech, climate tech, clean energy really is useful. Having policymakers, regulators, all the folks in this world, really good conversations there. Also, we put out a newsletter every Friday morning called the Echo Chamber, and it's really candid, timely insights on policy and the politics shaping the industry, both in Washington and also beyond. And we usually highlight a compelling leader through a Q&A series that we do, voices that people should really hear. And so if folks want to learn more about that, and just generally, they can go to echocoms.com/rides. And it's ECHO comms, COMMS.com/rides.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you for putting that out there. I mean, it's for someone that's not in the policy space, it can feel daunting to try to keep up with everything.
And I will say, this is not dry policy, emails. This is, we try to keep it interesting because, folks have a lot going on in their lives and they don't want to be bored.
Certainly. Well, I'm curious, kind of, I'd imagine there's some level of policy in this, but maybe not now that you're a new father. Please finish this statement. In my life, I will have been successful when.
It's hard not to go to thinking of my son when I hear that, but just when my wife and I have raised a good person who's kind to others and thoughtful, just a kind, thoughtful, generous person. That I think is a good metric of success.
I'm reaping the benefits of all the good policy support that your dad has developed.
That's right. Well, you're speaking to two dads here that resonates with quite well. Chris, I really appreciate your time and for all the work that you and your team do in helping, shape policy, drive policy, help people understand the importance of helping to shape policy. Because I think, to your point, there was a big change that happened earlier in the year from a huge piece of legislation that was passed several years back, and I think we're going to see the knock-on effects of that for years and decades to come. But it doesn't mean that there's not work to be done. I think there's a lot of great things out there, and again, thank you for everything that you guys are doing.
Well, thank you, Dan, Gareth, for having me. I just really implore everyone to, you can't leave policy to chance. You have to engage, and it does pay off eventually.
You're awesome. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
Gareth, that was a great conversation. Chris, I love his passion for the space, and more and more policy becomes so critical to the way our energy system works and gets monetized and operates, and long-term decisions are made. What jumped out for you?
Well, we're recording this actually a couple of weeks after we interviewed Chris, and I think what's been super interesting, Dan, is that rising energy costs have been utilized in recent election successes across the country. Energy continues to become front of mind, I think, for residents and businesses across the country. And as an example, Democrats swept both Virginia and New Jersey's elections, along with down ballot races in Pennsylvania and Georgia. And this is after months of these people hammering on the cost of living being tied to Republicans, and the soaring electricity prices being a big part of that. And so it's very interesting to see this being used in ways to secure seats, to influence political outcomes. And it's very front of mind for people right now because the inflationary pressures have been incredible, and energy is obviously a key part of that. How about you?
Yeah, for me, so it has been interesting to watch that play out in real time, and especially, in the time since our conversation with Chris. I think for me, it really jumped out his kind of encouragement, or maybe even so much so as a call to action to people to get involved and speak up and engage with their probably both local politicians, because I think local influences more of our daily lives than even federal, but even reaching out to our local representative for our area and senators in your state to advocate for your thoughts, your beliefs on how the energy landscape is affecting you, how rising prices are affecting you, how you would like to see things done differently, because they do listen, and to the extent that they can influence the way that federal or local policies are changed, I think it's important. And I think also when we think about, again, we're in a highly regulated market, and oftentimes these regulators may not be voted in. They might be appointed by the folks that are voted in. And so that's another important aspect of getting involved and participating in the dialogue, because it does impact our daily lives.
Yeah. I appreciate this commentary around, you may not get a response when you either write in or call in, but they see it enough times and it's just constantly chipping away in the back of their minds. And they know that you're there for two reasons. One is to vote them in, or two is to give them money. And if you're upset about something, you're not going to do either. And so it's very interesting when you boil it down to the simplicity of that, isn't it? It's like people survive on your votes and your money, donations, and vote with your dollars and your calls and your vote, and use it wisely. So super interesting. I really appreciated him actually making it feel tangible, and we should all be doing it, a lot more of it.
Absolutely. No, it was a fun conversation. So good stuff, Gareth. Thank you.
Cheers.
See ya.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.